Welcome back to The Authentic Christian. My name's Aaron. This is Scott. This is Tucker. And today we're going to talk about how is Christianity different? Okay, so how is Christianity different? In the last lesson, actually the last two lessons, we talked about how to study the Bible, and once you study it, how you need to believe it and obey it. But we maybe touched on it a little bit. There are different places in the Bible that are addressed to different people. What I mean by that is throughout the history of mankind, according to the Bible, there have been certain messages given to certain groups of people. And so we've even touched a little bit on, for instance, building an ark. In Genesis chapter 6, Noah's told to build an ark for the saving of his household, right? Well, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully not.
Yeah. We had a hard enough time building some stuff for this set, so.
Yeah, I got no plans to build an ark.
Yeah, so what we want to start off by talking about is we want to explain this word covenant. It's kind of a Bible word if you've never been raised listening to the Bible or people teach, and some churches just don't talk about it. What does it mean to be in a covenant? What would you say, Scott? What does the word covenant mean? How would you explain it in kind of easy terms?
It's kind of like a contract.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, it's like a contract. The difference between the covenant in the Bible and like a contract that you or I would sign, we would sign a contract that's mutual. It goes both ways, so to speak. In other words, we could dictate certain terms. When we're talking about Bible contracts, Bible covenants, often we don't get a say in the terms of that contract. Mm-hmm. It's either take it or leave it. Mm-hmm. God decides what the conditions are going to be, and then he gives us that covenant, and that is what it is.
It's interesting. I don't really remember all the details, but I heard a guy talking about Genesis 15, God's covenant with, I think, Abraham. Mm-hmm. There was something, I guess, and I'm probably not going to interpret this or explain it the right way, but something like back in ancient time, if you had two people that made a covenant, one, they would, it sounds kind of gross, they would cut animals and put them, and then the person would enter into the covenant and say, if I don't keep my covenant, do to me as these animals. Basically, I'm giving you my word to the death. And in Abraham, I think it's a vision or he falls asleep. I should have looked this up before I decided to bring it up. But God, I think, passes through and God basically makes the covenant. So when we talk about covenants today, we're going to talk about three major covenants, okay? We're going to talk about what's called patriarchy or the patriarchal covenant. Some people say, what does that mean? Patriarch means father, right? So you've got the patriarchal covenant, which really runs from Adam all the way up into Moses. When you hear about the law of Moses, the Mosaic covenant that Israel followed with the 10 Commandments, you don't get that till Exodus 20. That's a long time after creation. I mean, that's like 1400 BC, I think is when the Exodus was. So what you have is this covenant that a lot of people don't even know about, where, how would you explain the patriarchal covenant? Before the law of Moses, you had Adam through Moses, and the father would offer sacrifices like in the book of Job, book of Genesis. Then you have the law of Moses, which is the second covenant. That's where they're given on Mount Sinai. Now, some people, there's sort of different camps. One would say that patriarchy continued all the way to Acts chapter 10 when Cornelius' household was offered the gospel. Other people would say patriarchy stopped at law of Moses and everybody was bound to the law of Moses. Now, we're not going to get into that, but when did the law of Moses end? What are some passages in the New Testament? Because Christianity, that's really the topic we're talking about. How is Christianity different? So, I mean, when did Christianity start?
Well,
I don't mean it to be a trick question.
No. One of the passages that deals with that comes from the book of Hebrews. Chapter 7, verse 12 talks about a priesthood being changed. It says, for the priesthood being changed, there is made a necessity, a change also of the law. And so we have other passages that talk about Jesus being our high priest. Mm-hmm. Of course, Jesus wasn't from the tribe of Levi.
Now, in the law of Moses, priests had to be from the tribe of
Levi.
Yeah.
Right. So, I should explain
that. No, you're
so,
fine. Yeah, it's great.
Old Testament, priests had to be from the tribe of Levi. Mm-hmm. Jesus was from the tribe of Judah. He could not have been a priest under the Mosaic system. Mm-hmm. So in order for him to become a high priest, there had to be a change of the law. Mm-hmm. Well, he is a high priest. The New Testament declares so. So there was, by necessity, a change also of the law.
Mm-hmm. And if you look at the book of Hebrews, kind of one of the overarching principles we talked about in the last two lessons, how you study the Bible, who's it written to? Well, Hebrew Christians who had come out of Judaism, the law of Moses. They'd left that, they'd become Christians, but now they're being persecuted and they're thinking about leaving and going back to the law of Moses. Right. And the whole point of Hebrews is don't. It's a better covenant. The Christianity is a better covenant. I think the word better is maybe used like 12 or 14 times, It's
used a lot.
Yeah. I mean, Jesus is a better high priest. It's a better covenant. You have, better promises. It's repeated.
More excellent.
More excellent. Right. Yeah. So you have this thing on Hebrews, which is like, no, don't go back to the law of Moses. We'll talk about some passages that differ, but Tucker, I see you flipping over there.
Oh man. Yeah. So now that we're now under Jesus, one of the things he said, if you flip over to John 18:36.
Okay.
And Jesus answered, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting that I might not be delivered over to the Jews, but my kingdom is not from this world.
Yeah. There's a difference in the covenants there.
Yeah.
The Old Testament covenant was a physical kingdom that they had at one point, right? You had Saul, David, Solomon. There was a physical government involved in that. That's not the way it is for Christianity.
It's funny too, because if you look at the Gospel of Mark, for instance, 16 chapters, the first 8 is Jesus doing like 20 out of 26 miracles in the Gospel of Mark, building up to the statement that he's the Messiah, right, with Peter.
Right.
But then after that, Mark 8 through 16, the second half, he has to explain to them what the Messiah is going to do, because the Jewish people in the first century had this idea that the Messiah was going to be like David or like Solomon. He's going to be an earthly king, and he's going to come in and wreck the Roman Empire. They're like, oh man, we can't wait till you take down Rome. And Jesus says, my kingdom's not of this world. His kingdom was spiritual. So you had something you were going to say. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to agree. They're still saying that about him when he's arrested during the trial. One of the things he's questioned about is whether he is a king or not. And he explains that during the trial at a couple points. Peter, I think right before he was taken, it seems to me, this is somewhat my opinion, it seems like Peter was trying to defend him from being taken because he still had this idea that they were going to create a worldly physical kingdom. And so it's like that they were with him this whole time. They were hearing what he was teaching, but it was so ingrained in their way of thinking that even up until the end, they were still thinking about this physical, we're going to build a nation with a border kind of deal.
You think about Matthew 24, the Olivet Discourse, where they're standing on the Mount of Olives, which is east of Jerusalem. You can Google Mount of Olives, and it will show you a current picture where you're looking. So it's on the Mount of Olives. You're looking towards, like for the viewer would be where the temple is. So you're looking, and the disciples are with Jesus, and Jesus basically is weeping over Jerusalem and pronouncing the woes in Matthew 23. And he talks about how not one stone is going to be left upon another. He's saying the temple in Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. And to the disciples, that meant the end of the world, because they're like, tell us the sign, when is the end of the age, the sign of your coming? Because obviously the temple's supposed to last forever, right? And Jesus's idea is no. Judaism is a physical location. You have to worship in Jerusalem. But there's coming a time, John 4:24, where you can worship in spirit and truth. You don't have to just worship in Jerusalem anymore. That's done away with. They destroyed the temple. So, you have this idea of a kingdom, physical in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, it's a spiritual kingdom. And there's no longer this division of Jew and Gentile. Go ahead, Tucker. You had something you're going to say.
Do you think that's why they tried some men when he was a baby, when Jesus came down, like when he was first a baby? You think that's why some people tried to kill him, because they were afraid that he was going to come and set up this earthly kingdom?
Yeah. What did the men, they went to Herod and told him, and basically Herod's like, we need to get rid of this guy.
Yeah. And what did he do?
Yeah.
He sent out people to go and kill
all the babies in Bethlehem.
He thought he was going to be a usurper.
Well, and you think about John 6. I think it's John 6:15. Let me flip over there. John 6, Jesus performs a miracle. Do you remember what they came and did? John 6:15. I think this is after he fed the 5,000. Yeah. John 6. He fed the 5,000. Verse 15. Well, look at verse 14. There's a break in mind, but of course those were added by men. Then those men, when they had seen the sign that Jesus did, the feeding of the 5,000 men, they said, this is truly the prophet who's to come into the world. I think they're referencing Deuteronomy 18:15, when Moses said,
prophet that would come,
the prophet. Moses. That's right. Like unto Moses. So they see this guy do a miracle, this guy. They see Jesus, the Logos, and they say this has to be the prophet of Deuteronomy 18:15. And look in verse 15 of John 6:15. Therefore, when Jesus perceived they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he departed again to the mountain by himself alone to pray. Is what Mark 6, I think 46 or 26 says. So they literally see this miracle and they're like, oh, this is the Messiah.
Yeah.
Let's make him king. And Jesus, no, I don't want to be king. That's not my purpose. Jesus' purpose was to establish the new covenant and to take away the old covenant. Hebrews 9:15, there's a couple more verses in Hebrews that I want to hit. Let me flip back over there. Hebrews chapter 9 and verse 15 says this: "For that reason, he is the mediator of the new covenant." Now, in Jeremiah 31 through 33, Jeremiah promises a new covenant. And if you go over to Hebrews chapter 8, which came right before this, Hebrews chapter 8 and verse 6, "But now he has obtained," speaking of who? Christ, "a more excellent ministry, inasmuch as he is a mediator of a better covenant, which is established on better promises." And then we're not going to read it, but if you look at Hebrews 8, 7 through 12, it quotes the Old Testament. It quotes Jeremiah 31 through 34. So that all the Old Testament prophets were looking forward to this new covenant. And so when we look at the new covenant, we can see it was way better. I mean, let's look at some of the things. Why was it better than the old covenant? What are some things the Bible says about it?
One of the verses that's saying like that why Jesus had to die for us was with his blood versus the older way of doing things, sacrificing animals, in Hebrews 10:4.
Yeah.
And it says, "For it is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins."
Yeah.
This is mind blowing. If you ever go read the Old Testament, like in my Bible, I'll write things like I was reading through 1 Kings a long time ago. I don't know when it's written in here. 1 Kings 8:63, I believe it is. Solomon at the dedication of the temple, I think I want to make sure this is right. He offered 22,000 bulls, 120,000 sheep, 22,000 bulls and 120,000 sheep. Now, I don't want to get too graphic, but when I was in Africa on mission, doing mission work, they don't have firearms, the regular people over there. So they had to kill a bull, and I had to watch them do it. And it was graphic. And think about 20, I mean, I'm not going to describe it too much because I don't want to turn your viewers off, but I was like a little bit queasy watching it. 22,000 bulls. Think about all the blood. I mean, it kind of disgusting. I mean,
all at once.
All at once.
We're not talking about over a time. We're talking about all in one place.
And what does Hebrews 10:4 say? What did that do for the sins? All that blood
is impossible.
It is not possible. Right? Did nothing. There was a reminder. Every time you sinned, you'd go take an animal to the priest. You slit its throat, didn't you? I think the person takes it and then the priest would do the rest? I'm not sure. I think if I sinned under the law of Moses, I had to go to the priest.
I think you had to lay your hand on its head and kill it.
Cut its throat.
There were different sacrifices. So we can get into that another day.
So I would have to do that. Do you think that would make us look at sin a little bit differently?
Yeah.
No, I'm thankful I don't have to do that.
Oh yeah.
And so, is that a better covenant?
I would say Jesus.
We don't have to do that.
We don't have to do that.
We don't have to do that. In a very small way, I guess you could say, in the grand scheme of things, makes it a better covenant because now we don't have to go to a certain place. We don't have to offer those sacrifices. There's a lot of work that goes into that. We have that taken care of for us. And that's a shallow thing, but there's a more deeper thing to that as well. I mean,
there's so many things. I mean, what are some other things that come to your mind when you guys think about the new covenant? I mean, 2 Peter, there's one verse, 2 Peter chapter 1 and verse 4. It talks about it's the new covenant. This is out of the book of Hebrews, but 2 Peter chapter 1 and verse 4. You can get over there and read it. 2 Peter 1:4. By which have been given to us exceedingly great and precious promises, that through these you may be partakers of the divine nature, having escaped the corruption that is in the world through lust. We have great and precious promises. That's an understatement. I mean, the fact that you can have the remission of your sins. The people under the old covenant, we know they had the remission of sins, but it came almost backwards through the blood of the cross, Jesus Christ. I mean, without that, there was no shedding of blood. I mean, when you look at all these things, it shows you the Old Testament covenants. I mean, we have it. We got it pretty good.
Yeah, we do. I mean, we all get to be priests now, right? That's another thing.
Yeah.
Was it 1 Peter 2, verse 9?
Verse 5 and verse 9.
Yep. It says, "But ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, and holy nation, a peculiar people, that you should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvelous light." So we have a privilege that was never afforded to a large group of people before, that we can actually approach the throne of God, spiritually speaking, and make our requests known. You think about the gravity of that statement. I get to ask the one who made everything, the one who controls ultimately all the forces of nature,
Yeah.
who set them in place, I get to go and talk to him, and he cares about what I have to say.
Yeah.
He listens.
And he wants you. He wants to talk to you.
Yeah, he wants to talk to you. He wants to hear from you.
Yeah.
I mean, people ask that question sometimes too. That's a side note to this. Why do I have to pray if God already knows everything that I need?
Yeah.
Well, because the same reason that you want your child to ask you for something.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what your kids need. You know they need food and clothing and shelter. But it's always nice when they come to you and they thank you for it. They ask you for it or whatever. Just that interaction. Yeah. He wants that relationship with you.
Mm-hmm.
And he cares enough about you that one of those members of the Godhead came and died for you, right? He shed that blood. We were talking about those verses earlier. What there's another one that I had in mind. Luke 22:20, likewise also the cup after supper, saying, this is the cup of the New Testament in my blood, which is shed for you. He laid down his life for you, right? He died for you. Some people have said before, Jesus basically said that the only way that you're going to go to hell is over his dead body, so to speak, right?
Yeah. Yeah. People say that, over my dead body. Yeah. Literally that's what he did.
Yeah. Like he's done everything that can be done for you as an individual. And you know what? I believe it. It's been said before. If there was only 5 people that were lost, he would have came and did it. If there's only one person that was lost, he would have came and did it. Why do I say that? You hear about the parables, the 99 sheep and the one that went astray. He went after the one. So each and every one of us is important enough to him that he cares enough about them that he would have done that. It wouldn't have had to have been the entire world that was lost for him to do it. So that's something that's special. That's something that's different about Christianity is we have a God and a hope that's unlike anything that we've ever had before, that he was willing to come here and be a part of it. Man, Jesus, he washed people's feet, other human beings. Like what other place do you have?
They weren't wearing tennis shoes back then. Yeah.
Right. And thinking about the things they walked in, they didn't have sewer systems.
No.
Yeah. So the God of all comes down, takes on a human form, laughs with people, cries with people. He weeps over the death of Lazarus. Even though he knew that he was going to raise him again, he still weeps over him because he felt that compassion for those around him. And he gets down on his knees and he washes his apostles' feet. Yeah. Right? Some of these people who are about to betray him, he still does that. Yeah. Tell me that's special. Yeah. That's something unique. That's something that's better about the covenant we have than what we've had before. Somebody posted that on something on Facebook recently, and they were talking about Jesus washing feet, and some guy commented and said, well, Judas had already left. No. I said, no, go back and read John 13-15. Judas had not left yet. Jesus washed his feet. And then think about this. You're talking about him sacrificing himself. In the Old Testament, Abraham, God gives Abraham Isaac. And he said, I want you to go sacrifice him on the mountain, Mount Moriah, right? He goes up there. Abraham is about to sacrifice his son, and God says, stop. He says, basically, and his son's like, well, where's the sacrifice? And he says, the Lord will provide a sacrifice, right? At first, it's his son. God stops him, and then he provides a lamb, right? Or ram caught in the thicket, whatever you want to take the Hebrew word. Then you fast forward. God says, will you offer your only son? And Abraham says, I will. And God stops him, says, nope, you don't have to do it. Then you go, 2,000 years forward from Abraham. And God, on this, apparently the same Mount Moriah, most people think is where Jesus, at the same range at least, where Jesus actually did die. So God asked Abraham, will you sacrifice your child on Mount Moriah? Abraham says, yes. God stops him. But then God says, nope, you don't need to, but I'm going to sacrifice my son on the same mountain for the remission of sins.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. First time I heard it, I was like, wow, that's really neat.
I remember when I was 17 years old, I wasn't a Christian then, but I just remember when there's those moments in life when you start really understanding things. For me, it just waited until junior year of high school. I wish it was sooner, but but I remember being a junior in high school, and the story of Jesus really hit me, and it just kind of changed everything of a high schooler's mindset, because it was no longer thinking about where you're going after school and Taco Bell and all that stuff, but you're actually thinking about real life stuff. And the story of Jesus and who he is and what that means for us and the hope that you get, it's something you really want to get behind, and he gives you that opportunity of obeying his gospel and becoming a Christian. And yeah, I love that we have that so much more than just killing your best goat. It's real, it's personal, and you can, it's something to get behind.
Yeah. I mean, I heard a story once, and they told the story. You know how sometimes in the Old Testament, David sins and Nathan tells him a story. He says, there's a rich guy and a poor guy, and the rich guy had all these lambs, and I'm paraphrasing. And the poor guy had one lamb, and the rich man killed it. And basically David's like, Nathan, what do we do to this guy? David says, kill that man. He says, you're the man, right? Well, I heard somebody tell the story once they told a story of a king. And the king basically fell in love with a peasant. And so he gave up his crown, and he went and left and basically became like a peasant, lived a poor life to see if that person really loved him for him. And then, of course, I was like, well, that's a really romantic story, like true love. And then they made the parallel of Jesus, Philippians 2:5-9, leaving heaven to come down. And the crazy thing about it? Jesus is the creator, Colossians 1:16, John 1:3, of all that was created. He comes to the people that he created and allows them to spit in his face, strike him. I mean, can you imagine when Peter, I think Luke 22:51, should we strike with the sword, Lord? He's like, put your sword, heals Malchus's ear. And it says, Jesus said, I think in Matthew's account, do you know I could call more than 12 legions of angels?
Yeah.
That's 60,000 angels. And according to the Old Testament, I looked this up before, don't worry, from memory. 1 Kings, the angel of the Lord killed 185,000 Assyrians. If you do the math, that means that Jesus could have called 60,000 angels and killed like 11 billion people like that. He's like, I could kill 11 billion people. Peter, I don't need your sword.
When you describe that, it just kind of like emotionally wrecks you because you're like, I'm sorry, God.
And it's even more than that. He said, I can call my servants to come and kill 11 billion people.
Yeah.
That's not even him doing it himself.
Yeah, and he said I could call more than. So he's like, I could call more than 11 billion. I could call more than 60,000 angels to come and wipe everybody out. But he didn't. He died alone, the song, for you and me. That's what makes Christianity different.
He had it.
That's right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Authentic Christian Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by the Gospel Broadcasting Network, or GBN for short. You can hop on the App Store, search Gospel Broadcasting Network, and you can download the app. And there's this show, many other great shows that you can watch or listen to. Start learning more about the Bible and why we're here, what our purpose is. Thanks for listening.
That kind of goes back to what we talked about before a little bit.
Which part?
The idea of not building that earthly kingdom, right?
If
he needed that army, he could have had it.
Well, you think of every like action movie, what happens? The hero, he gets like punched in the lip and he's like, ugh. But he like takes it because he's about to beat the guy up. And yet Jesus spit on, mocked, and he laid his life down. He could have wiped everybody out, which good for us, because if I was, God's in heaven, I always like to say holding back the armies of heaven. Because if you're God the Father and you're seeing them doing to your son, what are you, if you're if you weren't perfect, if it was me in heaven, I'd be like, cut them loose, send them all, wipe them all out.
And I mean, look, hey, Jesus being a member of the Godhead, all those angels, that was their God too.
Yeah.
So they watched, if they were able to see that, they would have watched us doing that to their God as well.
Some people will say that Christianity, there even, believe it or not, are people that will say that Jesus never existed. They'll say, well, Jesus, that's a nice idea, but he never really existed as a person. He's just like like a figment of people's imagination that they developed over 2,000 years. Yeah. Well, what would you do if you wanted to find out fact, right? There's so many evidences for the historicity that Jesus was a real person, but this is the Apologetics Press Study Bible, right? It's the only study Bible I recommend. Literally. It's the only one. Yeah. So this is an excerpt, and they have an article on page like 1853 on the historical Christ. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but they basically reference Tacitus, right? He's a historian, a Roman historian in the first century. He lived from 56. Jesus died in 30, 33, depending on your date.
So he's not a Christian. He's
not a Christian. Okay. Yeah. It says Tacitus should be among the first of several hostile witnesses mentioned. He was a member of the Roman provincial upper class with a formal education, held high positions under different emperors, not a friend of Christianity, right? In his famous work, Annals, A History of Rome, written in AD 115, he told of the Great Fire of Rome in AD 64. When Nero, the Roman emperor, that's who's ruling at the time, okay? This is what he says. Nero fabricated scapegoats and punished with every refinement the notoriously depraved Christians, as they were popularly called. Their originator, Christ, had been executed in Tiberius's reign by the governor of Judea, Pontius Pilatus, but in spite of this temporary setback, the deadly superstition had broken out afresh, not only in Judea, where the mischief had started, but even in Rome. Not a Christian, a historian, and he writes about the crucifixion of a real man named Jesus, crucified by Pontius Pilate.
That's what's cool right there. When you have real early writers back in the day, which I never even knew like those stories existed, but real life stuff that people saw it happen.
Yeah,
or were
there's
there.
records of Jesus. There's records of the people that surrounded Jesus and his death, like Pontius Pilate.
And after he resurrected, witnesses.
Yeah.
The gospel's not just...
And they wrote. Yeah. It's not like they kept silent.
Yeah. It's based off witness testimony.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard someone say either Jesus was this literal crazy man running around saying he could do all this stuff and he had this big following, or he was real. And even the people that followed him, his disciples, like, they died over him in evil, awful ways that, why would you just die for a lie? They believed and loved this guy.
You know the 3 L's? He was either a liar, a lunatic, or the Lord. Yep. I mean, the things he said, no one comes to the Father but by me. Other than me, basically, you're going to go to hell unless you accept me.
Right.
Either he was a crazy. That's crazy. If I told you guys that, you'd be like, this guy's out of his mind, right?
Yeah.
So he's either a liar, he's a crazy person, or he's the Lord. You talked about the apostles. Of the apostles, all but John, I believe, died like martyrs' deaths. Yeah. But before the crucifixion, they were right beside him, right? No, they fled.
Yeah.
What happened that caused them to go from denying Jesus and fleeing to somehow now being willing to die for him years later?
Yeah. That's a good question.
Crucifixion.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Come back.
So that's what
you can't say that Jesus was, he was a good man, but he wasn't really who he was claiming to be. And that's the point of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You can't say that because you have to say, no, he was nuts.
Yeah.
Or he's an absolute liar. Or like you said, what he said was true.
Would a good man say the things he said if they weren't true?
Right.
No, I wouldn't make him a good man.
You can't say that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. You're exactly right. So Tucker, what would you say if I asked you in 20 seconds to say what makes Christianity different? How is Jesus different than every other person that's claimed to be the Messiah since the world began?
So I wrote something down real quick and I'll read it. So I said, this hits home. It means there's a chance. It means there's hope in this life. It means we're really a part of the greatest love story known to man. That God made us. He loved us so much. Even though we messed up, he sent Jesus for us, died, and then was brought back to life, defeating death, raised from the dead, and then giving us the opportunity for everybody.
Yeah. So Jesus resurrected. Mm-hmm. All the other founders of world religions,
they're gone. They're 6 feet
still
under.
Dead. Paul in 1 Corinthians 15, I think, basically said if Jesus didn't resurrect, then we're wasting our time.
Yeah, most miserable.
Yeah.
Yep.
So when you look at that, that's what makes Christianity different. Scott, what would you say in 20 seconds?
I would say...
maybe 30, you can have 30.
Christianity is special and different because our God desires us to be a part of his family.
Yeah.
You think about like Luke 8:21, he talks about, his mother and brethren that came looking for him, where he says, my mother and my brethren are these which hear the word of God and do it. He came to adopt us.
That's family.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
he wants
family.
2 Peter 3:9 and 1 Timothy 2:3-4. He wants everyone to be a part of that.
Yep.
Just up to us. We have to choose.
Exactly.
We have free will. John 5:40, the people wouldn't come to him to be saved. They chose not to. He says, you weren't willing. So if you're watching, are you willing to come to Jesus? We'd be happy to study with you and tell you. Thanks for watching the Authentic Christian Podcast, and we'll see you back next time.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to the show today. We'd like to mention you can download these episodes. They are sponsored by the Gospel Broadcasting Network. We have an app available. You can check that out on Apple or Android devices, and you can stream and listen in to the show and get answers to life's biggest questions.